These are some of the most disturbing crimes that happen in the SCP community, and as the video goes on, the people behind them will go from twisted individuals to terrifying criminals. It's 2019 and the SCP is going through a very rough patch concerning its internal politics, with multiple high-ranking members getting exposed for inappropriate conduct both within and outside of the community. Most of these cases are open and shut, except for one, Cyantreuse, a perpetrator who also happens to be a victim. Cyan first joined the wiki when he was just years old and would go on to publish a couple of articles, some of which are considered questionable, like the infamous SCP-2678 titled The Warhole, co-written with one of the biggest names in the community, DJ Cactus. The article describes a Fifthist church that lured unassuming people inside, using billboards along a nearby highway. Once inside, these individuals are forced to walk down an esophagus in the floor, leading to a stomach that draws people inside using intense, intimate urges. It was eventually deleted by the wiki staff, and some believe this might have something to do with the fact that it originally contained a picture of Cactus's uncensored behind. Cyan was also a key figure in Site 12, SCP's adult section, and participated in the wiki's infamous Fat Life community, which is a community of people with unconventional fantasies, alongside key members like the Duckman. And Cyan was dangerously obsessed with the SCP Foundation, so much so that he got 4 SCP-themed tattoos, decorated his car to look like an in-universe SCP response vehicle, and even quit his IRL job to focus on the community and sell SCP merch on Etsy. But then, in January of 2019, he would suddenly be banned. The announcement doesn't go into details about why he was being kicked out. It just simply states that he's been banned following a long-term pattern of negative and unacceptable behavior across multiple SCP-related communities and sites, towards multiple SCP community members with varying levels of intensity. But this explanation was insufficient for most users, and by August of 2019, wiki staff were forced to clarify the reason behind this ban. The anti-harassment team concludes that Cyril has expressed violent behavior in his past relationships. Discussions that led to Cyril's banning did not concern allegations involving non-consensual intimacy, but a host of other behaviors on and off-site. The anti-harassment team did not receive claims regarding violent behavior towards smaller humans perpetrated by Cyril. Now, the SCP admin claimed that Cyan was innocent, but that still doesn't mean that there weren't allegations against him, especially concerning his conduct around younger people. Earlier in July of 2019, Kinch the Knifeblade would call out Cyan on Twitter, saying, "Hey, friendly reminder that Cyantreuse/Agent Tross is an active offender who uses the SCP community as a hunting ground. Please don't support his weird SCP merch. Don't ever let him forget what he is." And this wasn't some unfounded accusation, as Cyan himself has made multiple posts on his Tumblr account admitting that he uses the wiki like a dating app. "I love the SCP fandom because I'd be single otherwise. All my partners are from this community, and all my past partners were too, with the exception of my first boyfriend in high school." Kinch would make multiple posts after that, warning people about Cyan, eventually leading to Kinch getting banned from the wiki for off-site harassment about a week later. But Kinch the Knifeblade wasn't the only one exposing Cyan's secret affairs. In January of 2020, Pilz would make a highly detailed Reddit comment revealing damaging information about the secret sins of some of the SCP's biggest names, which not surprisingly included Cyan. If you pay closer attention to main site, you'll quickly know that the mental issues run rampant, especially among the younger community members. Some folks like to take advantage of that and invite any newly turned adult female into their domains. Witness got involved with an author named Cyantreuse, even before she became an adult. Cyan was aware of that. As their relationship developed, he started to maltreat and harass that girl, to the point that she started drinking heavily, and if memory serves, contemplating leaving this earth. After Cyan allegedly tried to force himself on the victim, she would report it to the staff. But it would turn out that the staff actually knew about Cyan's track record, since he did the same to one of the mods. And after a brief back and forth, staff would end up banning Cyan and Witness temporarily with a chance to appeal. But in the midst of all this backlash, Cyan would actually release a statement on his Tumblr page, admitting that he was a difficult person to be around. "A lot of times I was really positive, and it was genuine. That's fine. But a lot of times I was really negative, and it was also genuine. That's not fine. It's really important to separate how people see you from who you are, and I also failed to do that." However, Cyan wasn't willing to go down alone. As a last attempt at redemption, he would start revealing some of the deepest, darkest secrets of SCP's biggest degenerates, specifically DJ Cactus.
It has a conversation between Cyan and DJ Cactus going back and forth on whether Cactus ghosting Cyan was a case of emotional maltreatment or manipulation.
It begins with this email Cyan sent to a wiki staff named Taylor Itkin, sharing the story of how DJ Cactus went from constantly flirting and engaging in explicit and romantic conversations with Cyan to complete radio silence after he got what he wanted. What happened between us a few years ago was that I got mad at him for ghosting me. He kept talking to a bunch of other people despite his claim that he was just busy. For me, he went from constant intimate and romantic insinuations to immediate complete lack of contact for months. So I was upset, as a person gets when someone leads them on intimately and romantically and then completely ignores them all while talking to other people just the same. It's gaslighting, it's manipulation, it's maltreatment, staff's favorite word. Cyan would then drop the bomb, accusing Cactus of allegedly trying to get Cyan drunk the first time they met IRL, even though he knew that Cyan wasn't even 21 yet, which is the legal alcohol drinking age in the United States. I'll have staff know that in summer 2016, DJ Cactus brought me to his apartment, checked my ID to make sure I was over 18 so he could legally get intimate with me, and then offered me booze when I was, in my opinion, noticeably uncomfortable and said I was fine. He said, "You sure?" To which I had to say, "Yes, I'm definitely sure. I do not want to drink, and I've not had alcohol in a setting like that and don't want this to be the first time." If I recall correctly, he then said to let him know if I changed my mind, and then I definitely recalled that he wanted to go ahead and get intimate instead of sitting on the couch together and talking. What kind of picture does that paint? For Cyan, this was the moment they understood the predatory nature of the community, and because they didn't get intimate that night, their relationship started going downhill shortly afterwards, especially after she transitioned from female to male. I didn't realize it until 2019, but that night taught me what's normal in SCP hookup culture. That night taught me that I was never going to be worth anything but intimacy to the inner circle, and once I became my true self, I was punished for transitioning to something those men didn't want to have their way with me anymore. Cactus talked to me plenty of times normally after that. He acted like everything was fine. I started to question whether he'd been really mad at me or if I'd imagined it. How on earth am I the manipulator in this situation? So yeah, I definitely thought everything was fine between Cactus and I. It hadn't crossed my mind that he'd dig up something we thoroughly discussed and supposedly settled, and report me to staff for it. But he's vicious. He'll do anything to take out the competition, and all y'all do nowadays is help him do it. And a couple of months later, Cyan would decide to confront Cactus, leading to this uncomfortable exchange. Cyan starts by saying, "I don't know you. I don't know. You answer it. You're the one who checked my driver's license." And Cactus replies, "Last thing I needed was the cops breaking down my door. You carded me even. I mean, yeah, dude. Last thing I need is to get intimate with a person who isn't an adult. You gotta double check that." Cactus then tops it by making some derogatory remarks about Cyan. But while this may sound like an exchange between two bitter ex-lovers, another leaked chat log would later prove that this was Cactus's pattern of behavior. In it, Cactus can be seen having a conversation with another wiki member named Lady Katie, who was apparently homeless at the time, and Cactus would offer her a place to stay, but at a price. "I understand. You can come live at my house. Just a phone call away, girl. You know how I do. I forgot to mention alcohol. You'd have to get used to that too." Lady Katie was 20 at the time of this conversation, which means she also couldn't legally drink. But Cactus simply didn't seem to care, and would go on talking about how much fun they could have together before giving her his cell number. But unlike the other wiki members who got exposed for their horrible behavior, Cactus never actually got banned, and he keeps rising in ranks within the community, and at this point it looks like he might never face any consequences. What comes next, however, is a much different kind of controversy that shook SCP to its core.
How dare you make a joke on this article about a death satellite wanting to be a trans woman that watches a tune? How dare you make a joke? Don't you understand the importance of this?
It's June 2018, a month dedicated to celebrating the members of the LGBTQ+ community, and like many other companies and organizations, the SCP Foundation decides to incorporate a pride flag into its logo, in solidarity with the thousands of LGBTQ+ individuals in the community. But this seemingly innocent decision would end up triggering one of the biggest scandals in SCP's history. As soon as the new logo went up, the entire community was immediately split into two warring factions: the majority who thought it was a good idea, and the people on the other side who didn't agree for diverse reasons. First were those who argued that it completely ruined the wiki's aesthetics, which was supposed to be harsh and dark. Then there was the side that claimed the giant rainbow on top of the wiki broke the reader's immersion, affecting the feel of the site itself. And on the other end were those who hated the flag simply because it was ugly. Not to mention the members who faulted the SCP staff for using the race-inclusive general pride flag instead of the original flag. But the main bone of contention for many SCP members was that the decision to make the logo wasn't actually discussed. Instead of throwing out a poll to see if it was okay, say, a bunch of mods just changed the logo overnight. For those in support, the argument was simple. The wiki was no longer the cold and dark unfeeling community it used to be when it started, and was now more wholesome and humane. They also argued that the immersion problem was blown out of proportion, since the site also had various reading guides and chat links. But even some among those who defended the new logo agreed that it was ugly, forcing the staff to change it into a better looking one about a week later. But eventually what started as an inter-community drama soon spiraled out of control, as the mods would get really defensive, banning anyone who raised objections to the flag, as well as those who questioned the ban itself. And the foundation would then address the situation on Twitter, saying,
about the SCP participating in Pride Month. While it's true that half of our staff and a big chunk of our wiki writers are LGBTQ, it's not just that. The internet is not a kind place to LGBTQ people. The SCP wiki came from 4chan initially. It came with Chan culture and its toxic baggage. Making the wiki inclusive was a project by our members that lasted years. But it was worth doing. It was worth making the wiki a positive, creative space. It was worth purging members who stalked and harassed people. It was worth making, following, and implementing anti-harassment policies. It made our writing and editing better. Our community is freer.
At this point, the feud still localized within the wiki, but on June 17, 2018, a YouTuber named Mr. Meadowcore would drop a video titled LGBSCP, criticizing the SCP wiki for neglecting its 4chan roots and claiming it was desperately trying to be politically correct. He also brings up the issue with SCP-7143J, a satire SCP about a doorknob people wanted to use as an adult toy. This article is a well-known joke within the community, with a positive 229 rating, which means that most people actually thought it was funny. But Mr. Meadowcore's video highlights the very few who dislike the humor, using that to further the argument that the entire wiki hates fun.
And you can see these people starting to filter in, to infiltrate, to really throw out the absurdity of not finding things funny or taking offense at an obvious joke.
Another point Meadowcore brings up is the case of SCP-2721, a controversial article that divided the community because it featured Tumblr and the webcomics Homestuck as main parts of the SCP. This made Meadowcore really angry, as he couldn't accept the fact that a trans satellite who likes Homestuck could get 155 upvotes.
How dare you make a joke on this article about a death satellite wanting to be a trans woman that watches a tune? How dare you make a joke? Don't you understand the importance of this?
And this exact video would end up triggering a massive raid of 4chan users storming the SCP wiki, attacking wiki members in the on-site forum, downvoting SCPs they didn't like, and sending death threats to several authors. And with the infighting already going on within the community, many of the dissenting SCP authors would decide to leave, taking their own work with them. And just a few days later, a new community was created, called RPC, or Research Protection Community, which was supposed to be the exact copy of the SCP wiki minus the politics, as it was now headed by these former authors. However, one of the moderators of this new community was so mad that SCP-2721 was even allowed to exist in the first place that he made an image where he decapitated the author of the SCP and would proceed to send it to his actual DM, which can be considered a threat to life. But eventually things would start to calm down. The raiders left, the hate comments slowly dried out, and the wiki returned to business as usual. On June 23rd, the SCP Foundation would post a thread on Twitter saying,
during the chaotic reaction to the SCP wiki and our associated social media logo changes for Pride Month, a number of users began trolling our platforms in ways that required staff intervention. In the endeavor to remove toxicity, several of the users and staff members who run or moderate our social media platforms overstepped their authority in disciplining several accounts which weren't actually trolling and had legitimate concerns or criticisms of the change.
The thread then ends with an apology to everyone affected, along with a note telling anyone who's been unfairly banned to reach out for an appeal to their ban. But the next case is even more disturbing, since the victim was a younger person
who made allusions to a known person who had been acting creepy with in Site 12.
Ayman Lu Balatayo, also known as Sashao or Sadshao, was an SCP author who flew under the radar while he was a member of the community. Although he was an SCP staff, Sax didn't actually write much, with his most notable works being SCP-1512-X, an article about 6 electromechanical devices capable of artificially creating cellular matrices resembling functional human organs, and SCP-1713, which explores a radioactive underground factory complex filled with a variety of machines, complex assembly lines, and sentient robots with human brains. But what he actually had going on behind the scenes was so horrific the wiki had to break its own rules to cover it up. It's January 2019 and the SCP staff announces that user Sax has been permanently banned for an off-site harassment case, a vague description that doesn't tell the full story of why he was kicked off the wiki. For the next 1 year, the case goes completely silent, with no updates, no victims, and no callouts. But on January 9th, 2020, a Kiwi Farms user named VDNB6 decides to bring fresh attention mentioned 2 Sax's banned.
A while back, a PDF file who frequent SCP IRC chats, including several NSFW and roleplay ones, got banned. He was caught doing a lot of creepy things to younger people in this SCP fandom. Now, to my knowledge, a lot of people know what he did, so he probably has no hope of making a return. But here's the issue. He never got an actual disciplinary threat, despite being a longtime member of the community and a writer.
But while the SCP admins were trying to protect their own image by burying the Sax scandal as deep as possible, VD and B6 would decide to do their job for them. He would release multiple screenshots that finally revealed that the real reason Sax was banned was because he was having inappropriate conversations with younger people. One of these screenshots was from a 2018 Discord chat where a user named Pills called Sax out for having pictures of a user who was possibly not an adult. Sax, who was around 25 years old at the time, would deny it, but Pills wouldn't back down.
I frankly don't believe you. What benefit would I receive from having her pictures for myself? You've clearly expressed interest in her, and I will do it properly and take my time. You may call yourself old-fashioned. I was born and raised with traditional values, to know her as a person and to capture the beauty of the soul, rather than the lust of the flesh.
But in another screenshot, Sax can be seen flirting with another victim named Witness, who had previously been exploited by another well-known SCP member, as we already know. In a bid to make her comfortable talking to him, Sax would reveal that she isn't the first younger person he's been talking to.
I'm also Master, what else do you do? Admittedly not a fan of MPreg, for that can't be helped. Well, I draw a lot and play video games. To state it broadly is kinda dull, but I do a lot of stuff each day. I've seen your art for myself and color me impressed. He's also an old boy at 25. Hopes that he'll be easy to approach and talk to. Thank you, and you will be. I'm good friends with a ton of people in the community.
Again, Witness wouldn't reciprocate the roleplay, but instead let Sax know she's just trying to make friends in the community. But that wasn't going to stop Sax from pursuing this new love interest. A few days later, he would make his move again. However, this time, Witness would decide to shut it down. Seeing that she was serious, Sax would claim he was only joking.
Catch a fly. You're a pretty fly. Can I catch you? Not okay with that. I kid. Flies are kind of gross though. Has accidentally ingested one before.
Now, days before Sax would actually be banned, an anonymous wiki member would actually report him to Pills, letting him know he already escalated the situation to the proper channels since the people in charge didn't want to do anything about it.
It isn't an isolated incident, his creepiness with younger people. And through his repeated creepiness has made its way to another person who's decided to take official action.
Pills would be dumbfounded.
This has gathered storm and will go forward, regardless of your involvement. This will most likely also include in some way, even if not directly. That, of course, is a different situation. A different situation with the same circumstances. In case it might be of use, he randomly asked someone in SCPD about their age. Didn't read the conversation though, so I don't know the context. I saw that.
Thankfully, this report was enough to get Sax booted out of the community. And although he apparently tried to join RPC, the rival creative writing wiki, he was immediately rejected once they found out about his history. This next one though was even more unsettling, since it involved not one, but 2 of the biggest names within the community.
He is a victim of a situation, and yes, sometimes people like this tend to or normalize this behavior with the person that they're talking to.
Gabriel Jade was a well-known SCP author who joined the wiki in 2009 and would go on to create some of the most popular articles on the platform, including SCP-049, also known as the Plague Doctor. SCP-049 is a humanoid entity that resembles a medieval plague doctor, with a robe and ceramic mask, which are actually part of its biological body, fused to its skin. The Plague Doctor believes that the world is afflicted with a fatal epidemic disease, and would become extremely aggressive when it encounters anyone it perceived as infected. It will attempt to cure the individual through a form of surgery using tools it conjures from its ropes, but the victim usually ends up dying, only to rise again as a sort of zombie. Now, this SCP-049 would eventually become one of the first SCPs to go mainstream, with multiple fan arts and YouTube videos exploring the character's disturbing story. But what most fans of this SCP didn't know was that the author behind this character was more of a monster than the Plague Doctor himself. It begins in 2018 when Gabriel, alongside another SCP author and proofreader, Escobar, creates an ERP server, so an explicit role-playing server, with a 17-year-old wiki member identified as Insurgency Moon, or Z. The roleplay involved an immortal Psychic Girl character, which was represented by Z. This particular being was a follower of an SCP universe religion known as Sarkism, who has achieved some sort of biological immortality that allows it to grow extra limbs, regenerate organs, or create entire living structures out of meat. This allowed both Gabriel and Escobar's self-insert characters to exploit Z's character in extremely graphic and violent ways. And since she couldn't be unalived, it meant that they could engage in unconsensual intimacy with her forever. And the fact that Gabriel was in his 30s at the time, while Escobar was in his 20s made the whole thing even more unsettling. A few months into the ERP, Gabriel would try to get Cyantreuse to join the server, and their conversation would show a glimpse of how horrible the situation was. Gabriel, whose username is Iconoclast, starts off by sending Cyan a payspin with Escobar's part to catch him up on how far they've gone with the RP, and after reading it, even Cyan is dumbfounded by how long and gruesome this fic is.
How many people are in Redact's server, and how many of them are main site people? If there's this many people in there and no one has been arrested or whatever, I guess I don't care.
Gabriel would reveal that there are about 18 members in the server, and Cyan agrees to join, but then Cyan actually finds out that there are younger people in the server and gets even more disgusted.
That's honestly gross. I feel bad for pretending to be cool with that, especially since they have explicit intimate conversations in the general chat where there are presumably people under.
Cyan also brings up the argument of the legal age of consent, but Gabriel defended himself by saying was the age of consent in a state and the victim's home province, which is why he isn't actually bothered about it. But as the conversation goes deeper, Cyan himself begins to justify their interactions with these younger members, saying,
I feel like a PDF file when I'm attracted to someone who seems like or inexperienced. Witness almost freaked me out a little for that reason, but once her nervousness went away, her behavior was like normal in terms of maturity.
Gabriel says he also feels the same, and the two end the conversation shortly after that. Another screenshot provided by Cyan shows a conversation he had with Escobar in June 2019, where he tried to minimize the gravity of what was happening in the server, while admitting that he wrote the worst of it with Z's consent. Except the problem is that anyone who isn't an adult can't really consent to anything of an intimate nature. But as horrible as the actual ERP was, Gabriel and Escobar's inappropriate behavior extended way beyond the server, and the true extent of their crimes would eventually come to light on May 3rd, 2020, when Z herself posted a Kiwi thread, accusing a bunch of SCP staff of exploiting her. In one of the Discord screenshots he shared, Gabriel, or Iconoclast, can be seen sharing a link to an adult video with the caption, I feel like this is going to be you the first time you get intimate with me. Z then replies saying she's been getting hooked on adult content since he started sharing them with her, and Gabriel seems excited about the video, so much so that he even shows her the timestamps he wants her to watch. And Z would then reply with, if my lord has more to show me what will happen to me, I'll be very grateful. Keep in mind this chat was from 2018, when Z was only years old and Gabriel was over 30 years old. And while it seems like Z was also fine with it, according to these texts, it's important to know that she was actually manipulated by these older individuals who shouldn't be having this kind of intimate conversations with her in the first place. Fast forward to 2020, and the rumors of Gabriel and Escobar's actions started circulating in the community, with multiple wiki members reporting the issue to the anti-harassment team. This would result in both Gabriel and Escobar getting banned on the same day in May 2020, although the reason behind their ban was simply stated as unacceptable behavior. But the vague description didn't sit well with the wiki members who made the report, including Witness, who would later post a Kiwi Forums thread revealing that she'd actually reached out to Soulless, a member of the harassment team, with receipts of Gabriel and Escobar's crimes. This includes screenshots of Z's conversations with Escobar, where she recounts Gabriel saying he'd love to have his way with her while Escobar watches, as well as another instance where Gabriel describes in great detail how he wants to use Z's body. Even when Z herself brings up the age of consent, Gabriel would immediately wave it off as an easy part to disregard, before letting Z know he'll be doing inappropriate things to himself while thinking of her. All of this was shared with Soulless in January of 2020, 4 months before Gabriel and Escobar would eventually be banned. And after people started calling out the staff for ignoring the report, they released a statement saying, 2 users, one of whom was a member of staff and the other a former member of staff, were discovered to have exchanged NSFW messages with a smaller human. We received a rumor about the incident near the beginning of this year, but in an initial interview with the case's victim, they claimed at the time that nothing inappropriate had occurred and that they did not desire us to investigate this incident further. We believed the victim's account and acceded to their wishes. But Escobar himself would later release an extensive apology on Twitter, where he tried to justify his actions by claiming that Z had initially consented to and even encouraged their interactions. He also claims to have written the ERP because Z, who was a big fan of his, asked him to, while admitting that his actions were at the very least questionable. Since then, Escobar has completely vanished from orbit, just like Gabriel Jade. But they weren't the only ones who got exposed by Z, because in the same thread, she calls out another SCP moderator named Randomini, whose story was even more disturbing.
When Insurgency Moon arrived at the Kiwi Farms to tell her tale, she levied accusations against many people. One such individual was Randomini.
It starts in late 2017 when Z and Randomini first get into contact. Z, being a huge fan of Randomini's work, was blown away by the attention he actually gave her. And because Z was going through some tough time with her parents, who she describes as being controlling and oppressive, Randomini was her safe space, as she would constantly share details of her home life with them. But everything changed after Randomini suddenly invites her to his actual house.
We found out that we could go to comic conventions together and met up. I kind of worshipped him because he was a much older guy and wrote some of my favorite tales. And he had so much wisdom to share about life and writing. He acted so interested in me, was kind of touchy, and even talked to me about some stupid smut that I was writing. Life at home was tense, so this was fun. But one day he suddenly invited me back to his house with him. Keep in mind that was and he was a man at least in his mid-20s living alone.
But when Z told him that her parents wouldn't allow her to come over, Randomini actually responded by saying that they were being too controlling and that she shouldn't tell him where she was going.
I went online to apologize and explain to him, but his attitude took a 180 turn. In private messages, he got furious at me for not coming and said that he didn't care whether my parents were going to punish me. He's just disappointed for me not coming. I stupidly thought that he was still my best friend afterward, but he was nothing but an abrasive. When I mentioned to him how Sunny Clock worked,
another popular wiki author who had a close relationship with Randomini
began bullying me, and her friends started sending me angry DMs on Tumblr for my art getting more upvotes. He told me that he didn't care if I died and to just leave the site because he no longer saw any value in talking to me. I was dumb at the time and didn't see it for what it was. So glad I didn't go to his house.
And their relationship pretty much crumbled after that, with Randomini ghosting her and eventually cutting all ties. However, it's also important to note that Z didn't actually provide any actual screenshots to prove these allegations, which raised a lot of questions about whether this story was actually true or not. Randomini himself never came out to confirm or deny the allegations, but many of his fans continued to vouch for his innocence. What comes next, however, wasn't an explosive drama, but an SCP author taking advantage of their audience in the worst way imaginable.
Time to do the deed with someone else. My nerves have stopped me from being able to perform because I have incredibly bad anxiety when it comes to the actual physical act.
Lord Bung was one of the biggest names in the SCP community, a YouTube animator best known for his hit series Containment, an animated story set in the SCP Foundation universe. His channel exploded in popularity, racking up over 1.1 million subscribers and pulling in millions of views on every single episode. For a while, it seemed like Bung had it all: a loyal fanbase that extended far beyond the SCP community, a thriving online career, and a series so captivating that people were willing to pay just to see more of it. But Bung's massive empire would soon come crashing down, all because of one devastating mistake. It begins on February 22nd, 2023, when Bung's best friend and co-writer on the Containment series, Orion, posts a tweet longer, accusing another YouTuber named Quiet of having forced intimacy with them. To start with, Orion claims he first met Quiet when he was just a teenager, and Quiet a small YouTuber with less than 500 subscribers, and he would help Quiet create his now famous Sona, the masked sunglasses wearing character that would later define his channel, and slowly the two became good friends, bonding over their shared mental health struggles. But what started as a feel-good, wholesome story would soon take a darker turn after Quiet allegedly started showing signs of manipulative behavior. Orion would shake it off and keep their friendship going, and eventually the two actually arranged to meet up in real life, and a decision they would end up regretting.
At this time we were both on and off flirting and had discussed that if we were both single at the time, we would have intimate relations with each other. However, once he'd come on to me in the backseat of my car, I started to get cold feet. He, however, did not want to take no for an answer.
According to Orion's story, Quiet then allegedly forced himself on him inside the car, and once he was done, started acting like nothing happened. Their friendship would then crumble after that, with Quiet allegedly ghosting him and sending harassment towards him when he actually tried to speak on the situation. In a reply to the tweet longer, Orion would then post a link containing screenshots of Discord chats between him and Quiet, along with actual pictures of Quiet himself, which was weird since Quiet actually hadn't done a face reveal at the time. And the story would kick up a storm all over the internet, with almost everyone taking Orion's side, including Lord Bung, who would make a post on his Discord server saying,
"I just want to say that I've known Orion for several years now, and I know he's telling the truth. It would be a stupid amount of effort to actively and expertly lie about the details of these events and his raw visceral emotions for years."
Bung then talks about one time he mediated a call between Orion and Quiet, describing Quiet as incredibly harsh, aggressive, and socially transactional, and very physical when drunk. The next few weeks were hell for Quiet, as many creators he'd worked with in the past cut ties with him, and even his hardcore fans didn't know what to believe. But on March 11, 2023, Quiet would release his response video titled "For the Record," and not only does he debunk every single allegation, but he would also include dozens of chat screenshots showing that Orion was actually the one trying to force Quiet into having intimate relations with him.
Quiet tired. Also, what are your family doing while we hang? Because if they're out, hotel room empty. We'll see. I love you, B, but I'm serious about the offer. I'll think about it. Heart, platonic. Seems more gay than platonic. Come down south. No, I know you're online. I'm gonna F you if you don't pick up. I'm gonna F you.
Since Orion already revealed Quiet's face out of spite, he decided to make the video without his usual disguise, and even had to admit some extremely personal insecurities in order to prove that he couldn't have forced himself on Orion. This video changed everyone's perspective on the situation, especially since Orion had practically no evidence to back up his claims, while Quiet showed tons of proof. However, Orion wasn't going to bear the consequences of the false accusations alone, as people also start calling out Bung for pushing a false narrative about another YouTuber. But instead of backing down now that the truth was out, Bung would double down instead, saying,
I'm not apologizing for supporting my friend who had their life ruined by SA. It's wild to me that people expected me to do nothing when my best friend came out about their story.
However, a few days later, Bung would make a follow-up post in his YouTube community and Instagram, finally admitting that he was wrong and offering an apology to his fans.
I'm sorry for all the anger and frustration I've aided in causing. I'm still processing the information in Quiet's video. I thought I was just helping my friend. Orion and I have been close for years, so this was a lot for me to digest.
He would then go completely silent after this, leaving his fans wondering if he'll ever come back, because before this whole drama started, Bung had released 7 containment episodes and 5 special videos, all within a span of 3 years. But everything would suddenly slow down in 2019, although Bung kept providing updates indicating that episode 8 was still in the works. Since the video was literally being funded by the fans through his Patreon, they felt he owed them the episode. Some were even willing to forgive him for the Quiet situation, as long as he just gives them exactly what they'd waited for almost 4 years. But Bung was actually done. June 7th, 2023, a 4-minute clip of the infamous episode 8 leaks on YouTube, but it's not what the fans expected. Instead of a proper story like the first 7, this one was a music video, with visuals that can only be described as softcore explicit content, with scenes depicting non-consensual intimacy. Everyone was pissed. This could be the masterpiece Bung had been working on since 2019. It had to be a prank, but it wasn't. And what fans didn't know was that Bung had one more trick up his sleeve. In the midst of the backlash, Bung actually makes one final community post on his YouTube channel, saying,
I stopped my Patreon a few weeks ago. If you want to download my videos, do it now, because I'm gonna delete this video in a day or 2.
And Bung's fans were stunned. This was a project they'd invested between $48,000 to $480,000. And now not only was Bung taking all the money and riding into the sunset apparently, he was also wiping every trace of its existence off the internet. Now the community did manage to salvage the previous episodes before Bung nuked the channel, and a bunch of dedicated animators eventually took over the project in October of 2023, keeping it alive as both as a comic and an animated series. In July of 2023, one of the writers working on episode 8 decided to leak the original script, confirming that there was an actual real plotline and storyboard in the works, which the fans will apparently never get to see. But just because Bung had successfully left the internet doesn't mean that the drama was actually over. March 5th, 2025, a post suddenly emerges in the confinement subreddit from an anonymous user with allegations that would be the final nail in the coffin for Bung's legacy. For the sake of the story, we'll call her Alice. Alice claims she first met Bung in July of 2017 after drawing a fan art of the Pupcast, which was a podcast Bung was a part of, alongside Squizzy and Aiden. They would become friends, and Bung would start sharing confinement and SCP sketches with her, while the 5-year-old Alice confided in him about her mental health struggles. But the closer they got, the more predatory their relationship became, from Bung allegedly drawing Alice's Sona being choked by SCP-173 with disturbing innuendos to actual unclothed depictions of Alice. Now she didn't take it seriously at the time, but Bung was slowly easing her into having adult conversations despite knowing her age. At one point he would even offer to make some NSFW drawings of them in compromising positions, and she, not knowing better, actually agreed.
She then asked me if I liked NSFW, to which I replied, I don't mind them, it's just art, which she then followed up with asking if I get intimate feelings by stuff, which when I said no, she dropped the topic.
Then in 2019, Bung would take things further by commissioning Alice to make some explicit art involving the main character in confinement, and it was only at this point that Alice decided to cut all contact with Bung. Bung never actually responded to these allegations and will probably never return to social media, but what comes next involves someone extremely heinous and disturbing, who was able to get away with these horrifying crimes for decades.
We can see in this story, Admin Bright has decided to put an odd hyperfixation on himself in a 5-year-old girl's body.
It's May 4th, 2020. Admin Bright, one of the founding members of the SCP Foundation, who created SCP's most recognizable character and is regarded by many as one of the most influential authors in the community, posts a disturbing message on the wiki, announcing his retirement. On the surface, it looks like a bittersweet goodbye from one of the pillars of the community, finally stepping down after more than a decade. But the chain of reaction that followed ended up triggering the biggest scandal in SCP history. Since joining the SCP in October 2008, Admin Bright, also known as Dr. Bright, or the Duckman has built a reputation as one of the most influential members of the community. His self-insert character, Dr. Jack Bright, is regarded as the SCP's most recognizable figure, appearing in over 165 articles, 16 of which were written by admin Bright himself. Dr. Bright was originally a brilliant Foundation researcher assigned to study SCP-963, a small amulet with anomalous properties. During an experiment, Bright was killed while wearing SCP-963, and his consciousness would get instantly transferred into the amulet. From that moment on, anyone who touches or wears SCP-963 has their mind overwritten by Jack Bright's consciousness, effectively becoming him, making him immortal. But just like the character, admin Bright also has a track record of questionable and perverted behavior, some of which were borderline criminal. Back in 2010, Bright released a short story titled Doctor, in which his character has the power to possess the body of anyone in the world. The article includes a scenario where he takes over the body of a 13-year-old girl and describes her certain body parts in a manner that sounds very creepy, to say the least. Not surprisingly, this story rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, but Bright simply didn't care. In 2015, a wiki member named Decibels commented on the article, saying,
15-year-old thing is an instant downvote. Good story otherwise though.
Bright would respond by claiming that it was a harmless joke, before another member then chimes in to say the whole thing comes off as creepy. Bright would eventually cut out the 15-year-old part of the story in 2018, after getting bombarded with so much criticism. But this wasn't the first or last time he fantasized about depraved and inappropriate things in his writing. In SCP-1004, titled Factory Corn, one of Bright's most famous SCPs, he presents the idea of a computer program capable of producing explicit content about any subject, including smaller humans and animals. Diary 573, released in July 2009, also contains unnecessary references and gory descriptions of his self-insert character, Dr. Bright, exploiting and even harming younger people. But beyond his work of fiction, Bright's creepy behavior also spilled into real life, as he would often misuse his position as an administrator in the worst way possible. As of May 2012, Bright was one of the staff in charge of admitting new members to the platform, and on the join page he added a note that stated,
"Don't forget, explicit self-pictures and monetary donations are always welcome and may help process your application."
While this was portrayed as just an edgy joke, there was at least one report instance of someone sending pictures directly to Bright, although it's hard to verify whether it was an actual picture of the person in question or one downloaded from the internet. In one of the leaked admin chat logs, one member named Swords brings up the issue, saying,
"Hey, so we got an application with spicy pics."
Bright made a joke on the join page that these kind of pictures will get you in, to which another user named Dr. Man then responds,
"Okay, I was okay with it when it was just a joke, but now that someone's actually sent pictures, I'm feeling all kinds of skeezy."
Another chat log also shows a conversation between Bright, seen here as the Duckman, and an SCP member named Clef, who was praising Bright, saying,
"Hey Duckman, you're my hero."
Bright then replies,
"Why? Cause I keep getting people to send me explicit pictures by talking to them about the SCP Foundation?"
Bright then tells the story of how he used his SCP position to hook up with someone outside of the community, saying,
"I was flirting with a girl from OkCupid, and when I told her I was Bright, I got invited to spend the night with her and her wife. And recently someone from the SCP Foundation Facebook page friended me and has been sending me spicy pictures."
Not long after, a wiki member named Joy also questioned him about another incident from 2009, where he asked a girl for suggestive images, and Bright wouldn't deny it. He even seemed proud of his actions. However, that's not the most disturbing part. Because while it may have seemed like the other admins were not aware of what was going on, they actually were, as Dexanote, a member of the disciplinary team, would comment on Joy's message saying,
"The Duckman's grown up, we're all aware of this."
And there are other instances where Bright publicly asked his followers for explicit content, like in December 2016, when he made a post in the community saying,
"I need more friends to randomly send me obscene images."
or in January 2017, when he announced on his Tumblr page that he was turning 37, and then followed it up with a message saying he would appreciate it if they sent him topless photos of themselves or their significant others as a personal gift.
"Whatever, it's the thing that makes me happy,"
he says. But Bright wouldn't just only use his position to get what he wanted, but he would also punish anyone who crossed him, including younger people. On December 2015, Bright would make a post on his Tumblr page, bragging about doxing a for trolling the community.
We refer to him as the meninist, because every time he popped into the chat, he would spout that kind of misogynistic things. Always was in bad taste, always trolling and giving us problems, a couple of death threats, and in general making the site a worse experience for anyone who had to deal with him. So how, you asked, did we finally get rid of him? We emailed his mom. She was quite happy to find out what her son had been doing and grounded him.
For a long time, it looked like Bright would never be held accountable, but in 2019, a couple of victims started speaking up, and Bright's pack of cards began to crumble. First, it was Cyantreuse, another SCP member I already mentioned, but in context of admin Bright's case, he was a victim, and one of the 15-year-old members would immediately let Bright know that there are smaller humans in the chat, with Cyan also bringing his attention to the fact that even he was a at the time, but Bright just kept going. What's even more disturbing is that according to Cyan, when he brought up the incident on the SCP podcast server, everyone seemed to be okay with it. The other wiki members in the conversation would then narrate their own experience, saying,
"Can't say I'm surprised, because I brought my worries up to Dexternote about him, and his response was, I trust Bright, but yeah, he used to ask female site members for pictures and stuff."
Cyan would also decide to report the incident to SCP admins and Solus, but that was too just like talking to a brick wall, as Solus kept deflecting from the conversation by claiming that the harassment team, which Bright himself was a part of, didn't have enough information about his crimes to hold him accountable, so they simply weren't going to ban him. Later in 2020, the victim Z would post a conversation with SCP staff Modern Erasmus, who, just like Solus, also claimed that there was no evidence proving that Bright did anything wrong. And Z would counter this by saying,
"So you're just going to ignore the history of his creepiness, such as going after young lesbians on Reddit, or the sheer amount of PDF file stuff he wrote in Tales before he was made to change it? Sure, unless actual laws are broken, staff will cherry pick what they want."
But the worst is actually yet to come, because while Bright didn't face any consequences until his retirement in 2020, many of his victims actually gained the confidence to tell their story and expose him for who he really is. On April 13th, 2022, an anonymous member of the SCP community would make a detailed account of their experience with Bright, opening the floodgates for more allegations. According to the victim, the incident took place around 2012, when she was just years old, trying to join the SCP wiki, but she couldn't figure out how to sign up, forcing her to contact Bright, and it's from their very first conversation that things started to go wrong.
"I spoke to him, and I distinctly remember getting this massively, dirty old man vibe from him. I didn't think it was weird at the time, but the way he talked to me, especially after I posted a selfie in the chat, was really predatory and weird. Stuff like pet names and making weird comments directed at me, and complimenting me in ways that you really shouldn't compliment a young person."
She also mentions Bright hitting on her despite knowing that she was actually younger, although she clarified that they never actually went further than that. But while these are wild claims, the victim never actually provided screenshots of chats to back them up, so they still remain only allegations. However, with the amount of information coming out at the time, the SCP harassment team finally decided to ban Bright's account, citing 3 major violations: unwelcome intimate attention, including sending users unclad images, pressuring explicit discussions or interactions, or repeated unwanted flirting, repeated inappropriate social contact, such as requesting/assuming inappropriate levels of intimacy with others, encouraging any of the behaviors defined by the harassment policy. And while admin Bright getting kicked off the platform was some sort of justice for his victims, it may have come a little too late, because according to SCP's own timeline, there was a report as far as back as 2014 claiming that while Bright was a member of the disciplinary team, he allegedly abused his power either in general or to prevent investigations into his own actions. As bad as this is though, the story still gets even worse, because in November of 2023, a Reddit user named Inkstained Goblin would post a thread detailing fresh new allegations against Bright.
"I knew him before he joined the SCP community at all. He was already suspect at the time, because he roleplayed female characters with their behind swaggle."
He then details how Bright gave him and his wife a place to stay after they became homeless, only to use that as an opportunity to allegedly take advantage of them. On a fateful day, for example, after he and his wife got drunk at the game night, Bright allegedly crept into the basement where they were staying and started doing inappropriate things to them.
"I never would have accepted sober, but I was drunk and 18 and relying on him for housing, so I didn't tell him not to, even though I was terrified."
The incident left a scar on him, and considering that Bright became a sort of celebrity shortly after that, adored by millions of people, he simply couldn't speak about the incident out of fear of harassment. But with Bright getting banned off the platform, he knew he had to come out, and now surprisingly, he wasn't the only one. On February 27, 2023, a Twitter user by the name of Daisy Bell would post an extensive Google Doc titled "Skeletons in the Amulet," containing serious allegations of exploitation and inappropriate behavior by admin Bright, backed with dozens of screenshots and text evidence. And while Bright still hasn't faced any legal consequences for now, his legacy in the wiki has been completely destroyed.